This episode of Hot Hardware's 2.5 Geeks is brought to you by Gigabyte's AMD X570 ARS motherboards for third-generation AMD Ryzen 3000 processors. Hit the link in the description below for more details. In this episode of Hot Hardware's 2.5 Geeks, we have a very special guest from AMD, and he's here to talk all things Radeon RX 5700 Navi. So if you want to get your Radeon, stick around. Next. Welcome back to yet another episode of Hot Hardware's 2.5 Geeks, where today we are adorned with all kinds of talent. I'm going to be the half geek today for sure, because the guys with me are full-on geek and full-on smart guys. Of course, as always, we've got Marco Jebait with us. Marco, how you doing today in lovely Connecticut?
I'm doing pretty good. Running around a little crazy. It's a little hot and steamy here, but no complaints. This is going to be a good podcast. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, because we've got a special guest, a guy by the name of Scott Herkelman from AMD. Welcome, Scott. Scott is the GM and VP of the Radeon business unit. Scott, how you doing, buddy?
Oh, I'm doing good. Marco, it's also hot in Austin. I think we might have you beaten temperatures like 100 degrees, but thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
I see your 100 degrees and raise you 80% humidity.
Dude, that is like fry an egg on the sidewalk kind of heat you got going on there, Scott.
Yeah, it's like it's an instant sell of deodorant, that's for sure. That's,
lovely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's I tell you, it's not the summers in Texas are not for the faint of heart. And are you broadcasting in from an AMD facility in Texas? Where are you right now?
That's right. I'm in a lovely conference room right here in the headquarters that we have down here, one of our offices and facilities. So yeah, that's where I am in Texas today. Nice. And I'm usually all over the world though. That's my job. Yeah. Be everywhere.
Getting the Radeon out all over there globally. Cool. So what's your role at AMD? I know you're VP and GM of the Radeon business unit, but what does that generally entail for you day to day and in terms of your high level responsibilities?
Yeah. So that's everything for Radeon. So I'm in charge of the roadmap. I'm in charge of the business, calling on customers, the marketing of it, the budgets for it, the P&L responsibility. And so, my job is the strategy of Radeon and making sure that we have a great strategy going forward and that we execute well for gamers and give them great products. And not just gamers, but I also handle the workstation market, our professional market, and make sure that we have good solutions for the professional people who use our Radeon GPUs as well.
Wow. So you're like the guy at the top when it comes to like the Radeon buck stops at you, kind of. Pretty much.
Well,
I mean, you got a team there. Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of people that work on the business and a lot of engineers, a lot of very talented engineers, and there's definitely people above me. But for the most part, I am the GM. So I manage the day-to-day business and making sure that we're on the right trajectory and we're doing a good thing for investors. And of course, we're doing a great thing for gamers. That's the most important thing for me, for our Radeon gaming GPUs, is making sure we're delivering great value.
Are you a gamer? Are you a big gamer guy?
I am. I used to think I was really good back in my younger days, and then I realized I wasn't, and so I quit gaming as competitively as I thought. But even when I'm back home, if I am home, I enjoy a couple games late at night between like 11 and 1 a.m., either League of Legends or lately it's been a little bit of Division 2 with some of my friends. But almost every night that I'm home, I at least try to get about an hour in.
I got to check out Division 2. Yeah, absolutely. I got to check out Division 2. Haven't fired that up yet. And honestly, I don't get enough time to game. Marco does game a little bit, I think. Marco, what are you playing these days?
So I've tried everything, but if I need to unplug, you guys are going to laugh. And I say this like every podcast that gaming comes up. I still love to jump into Left 4 Dead 2 because it's 20 minutes of mindless murdering of zombies, and then you're done. You don't have to maintain anything. You don't have to do anything but murder a bunch of zombies. So that's
wait. Which is your favorite character to play?
So of all of the Left 4 Dead, it's obviously Francis, but I love Ellis in Left 4 Dead 2 because he comes up with the best one-liners.
That was a great series. It's so funny, and the dialogue and then the interactions are just great. Absolutely.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of my
cool.
favorites.
So you talk the talk and walk the walk, doing some gaming as well. That's cool. Yeah, and I've got the Radeon 7 back there holding
Very
court on
nice.
top of the bookshelf.
Very nice. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. That looks beautiful back there. Thank you, sir. Looks good.
The only reason why it's not in my system right now is because it goes on the test bed every now and then for sure. So yeah, unfortunately, we don't get to play with all the baubles all the time, but yeah, it's one of those things. You just gotta take your spots. But let's move into the questions that we've culled together from the audience a little bit, and then we've got some few streaming in on the chat already. We'll get to those as well. Marco, why don't I let you tee off a couple, because I know the first few we had on our list, our short list, were sort of inspired by some thoughts that you had as well. And we'll pepper Scott gently here in the beginning, right?
Yeah, we'll ease into things. So one of the things that dawns on me as it looks like my video is kind of crappy today, guys. I apologize, don't know what's up. But one of the things, being on this side of the reviewers table, I always wonder what guys like you think after launch. You gave birth to your new baby. Did everything that you wanted the community to know about the Radeon RX 5700 and Navi? Do we know, has the information been disseminated? Is there anything the community missed? What do you want to make sure that the community knows about the RX 5700 series?
Yeah, that's a great. Hey, by the way, maybe it's solar flares on your video. Who knows what's messing with your Wi-Fi there? But I'm very proud of the reviewer community. I think that we tried to sample early to give you guys enough time. I am really excited about the reviews that have come out so far. I think the performance is exactly what we were hoping for. A lot of the reviews hit right where we thought they would hit. I think that now even more than ever, you're seeing more reviews on anti-lag, on Radeon image sharpening. And I think in the future, as game developers adopt contrast adaptive sharpening, we'll see a lot more of that in some of the reviews. But for the most part, I'm very pleased with all the review coverage. I think everybody's given us a fair shake. I think some have been really good, and of course some have been challenging. But I think that's any launch, right? Because when you seed over 300 press around the world who review your products, and they have different systems, they have different setups. That's why the PC industry is so great, because it's so diversified. You get different types of graphs and charts, and some people have time to do some anti-lag testing. Some people have time to do Radeon image sharpening testing. But I think overall, I think the reviews came in exactly where we thought they would. We predicted they would. And if anything, some of them have even come in a little bit better than we expected on some games. And I'm just glad that, we have tried to set a new tone for Radeon. And that new tone is, when we launch a product, we want to under-commit and over-deliver. We don't want to, show graphs or show performance or talk about technologies that never get adopted. And so our view is, we want to make commitments to gamers that we can live up to. And it's extremely important with our Navi generation to reset that expectation for the community, because there's a lot riding on Navi in the future of our company in the GPU space. I'm sure you've seen all the announcements from our console partners in the cloud, and there'll be even more announcements coming out. But this new architecture for us is really the future of AMD's GPU space, and we're extremely excited about it. And as a guy who is involved in a lot of our roadmap decisions out in time, I think that this is just the beginning of the new Radeon and the new Navi architecture. So I'm actually very pleased with the reviews and everything that's been going on. I would like to see more testing, of course, of Radeon image sharpening and anti-lag. I think it's a fantastic feature for gamers, but we're very pleased thus far, Marco. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. I had a question on Radeon image sharpening. Give us maybe a little quick little sidebar on that, just because to me it's fascinating technology in that it works at any setting, and seems to not only sharpen up contrast and different areas, but also sharpens. It seems to sharpen textures and really does a nice job of cleaning things up. What's like the core functionality of that? It's impressive stuff.
Yeah, so the way the technology works is, and when you turn on anti-lacing or any sort of post-processing effects, sometimes you get artifacts. artifacts in the image, and Radeon image sharpening uses those low contrast areas, and it just uses the performance in our architecture and the built-in advantages that we have and that we've wanted to put into our drivers, and it takes advantage of the new Radeon architecture, and then it sharpens up those little crisp images and really cleans up the parts of the game image in sampling that might be a little bit blurry or come across as artifacts, and just makes them pop up on the screen a little bit more. And so if you look at most games without Radeon image sharpening turned on, you don't get to see a lot of those details that sometimes post-processing effects make it look either blurry or just really dim. And so with all the speed up that we've done in the clock speed and some architectural advantages that we placed in there, our driver now takes advantage of some of those speed ups. We're able to, do more passes and clean some of those low contrast areas up.
Gotcha. So folks sometimes, or at least initially here, have been sort of comparing it to DLSS with NVIDIA, and I keep saying, to folks in our comment section, a couple of folks that chimed in, that it's kind of apples and oranges. They do things differently. What are your thoughts there? Not that you have to get into your competitors' technology, but what are your thoughts on those comparisons? Is it really fair to look at both end products?
I think it's apples to oranges. What they're doing is a little bit different than Radeon image sharpening. I would let them respond to how they perform. I think there was an interview with Tony Tomasi not too long ago where he talked about they have some of the capabilities that we're talking about in Radeon image sharpening, and so I think that the way they approach it versus the way that we approach it is a little bit different. And I'm really happy with our software team and hardware team's ability to have less of an impact on your frames while delivering a better image for gamers when they actually see or play a game. So I think that we've been able to execute it better, and I'm very proud of that. Historically, I think they've usually done a better job in some of these effects and post-processing effects, but I think this time, I think our solution is winning in the marketplace.
Cool. What was your first thought when Silicon came back to the lab for Navi? What were your first impressions? How did you react?
It's interesting. I was up in Markham when that happened. Is quite a while ago. I won't say exactly when, but I was up in Markham, and it was less about my first reactions. It was more about the engineers who've spent countless nights and weekends. They're the ones that put in all the time and the effort. I'm just a business guy. I go in there and I watch them, and they're the ones putting in all the time and effort day in and day out, and to see the joy on their face of their baby finally coming to life for the first time. That's what I get excited about, because they're the smart guys in the room, and they're the ones that are building this thing from the grounds up. And so, it was a very exciting time for them, and which meant that it was a very exciting time for me.
Nice. Marco, I know you had a couple more questions on the roll to fire at Scott. Why don't you go ahead and dive in?
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting for the community to understand what happens during the bring up of a GPU and where you guys set the targets, and did you hit initial targets? Was it better than your initial targets? When you guys are, I know, because this is kind of exactly where you strategize and try to figure out where do we need to hit in the market in terms of performance and price to sell the most GPUs. And during the process for RX 5700 and when that the first silicon arrived, were you guys on target? How does that work? How does your mind work when you're setting those targets and getting that job done?
Yeah, we're able to model out our new architecture that we built and give performance projections out in time, many years in advance. Our architecture team obviously models out before they build a new GPU what they think it can do, what the new architecture and the efficiency gains can accomplish. So we're able to set performance targets and ranges when you model these things out. And so as we bring that chip up, of course, the first thing you want to make sure it can do is boot. And if it can boot, then you're one step further to launching a product, and then you start the software team and the hardware team start interacting to load a driver, and then maybe load the first pixel, and then pixel by pixel they bring it up, and then they start to try to run a game or a benchmark, and they see how that goes. And every step of the way, we're checking to see how is it booting in Windows and how is it booting in other operating systems, and then ultimately tracking its performance. I would say that it every step of the way either meet or beat our performance expectations. It meet or beat our efficiency gains we were looking to get. It meet or beat our ability to talk about new features and technologies as we started bringing those up one by one. So I think the engineering team not only overperformed, but we were all very happy with the process that we went through. And then as we got it to market, as you know, new games launch all the time. Every month there's a brand new game coming out, whether it's AAA esports or AA or single A, all across the world. And one of the things that is exciting about that is it gives our software team the ability to go in and test the architecture over and over again. And so as we went up to launch, every game that came out, we were just seeing these really fantastic gains and optimizations that we could apply to those. And so the initial targets that we set at Computex, the initial graph that we had up there, by the time we got to launch, even some of those benchmarks were better. And so, I believe this architecture will continue to breathe. And as new games launch, that the software team that we have, I mean, they're a fantastic group. They're going to be able to even figure out more optimizations that'll drive more performance for gamers.
Gotcha.
Good stuff. Good stuff. What are your thoughts? And I know in your group you probably have plenty of thoughts about this. But what are your thoughts on the push for real-time ray tracing in games, Microsoft DXR, and how those tools are available today? Is it really too early? Obviously, your competitor has built engines in silicon to optimize and to deliver that. At least the initial effects of ray tracing, features of ray tracing. What are your thoughts on that in general as it pertains to your product and future products?
Yeah, I think I've been on record already, and we are on record saying the real-time ray tracing is a fantastic technology, and Microsoft DXR is very exciting. We're very close partners with Microsoft on multiple levels, not only in the PC space, but in the console space. And, they're extremely excited about it as well. And if you take a look at the level of game adoption today, I think it's pretty low, and it's early in its lifespan. I think that you'll see our strategy is when the ecosystem's ready, we will be ready from a dedicated discrete GPU perspective. We'll be ready with real-time ray tracing, and so it's an exciting technology. We think it's pretty early in its life cycle in the adoption curve, and it'll take some time for game developers to come on board. And I think there's some things coming out over the next few years that's going to push that ahead. And we're timing it to the ecosystem being ready, because the game developers need an incentive, the hardware manufacturers need incentive, and I think as more games come out, I think that's when gamers will really be able to appreciate real-time ray tracing when the whole entire ecosystem's ready. So our view is it's a little early. And as you can tell from the number of games that have launched so far, new games that have launched so far, it's very few. And I think the benefits for gamers, it's such a performance hit that, not a lot of people turn it on and actually want to play with it on, because it does take tremendous amount of performance away from your GPU in a game.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Marco, do you want to chime in on that any more, or do you have something else in mind? I've got a couple more, actually, from the comment section that we can fire in there too.
So let's get to the comments, questions from the comments quickly, just to build on what you were just saying, Scott. When you say the ecosystem's ready, I kind of get the feeling, because AMD is basically inside everything that's not a PC as well. Do you feel like when the console developers, when everybody's leveraging it, that's the time for AMD to jump in, or are we waiting for the next gen PlayStations and Xbox to really hit their stride before we see it from you guys on the PC as well?
Yeah, I don't want to pre-announce anything for our console developers, but I would say when I mean ecosystem, since we span consoles, PCs, cloud, and now mobile, I think that there's a tremendous amount of insight that we have into the prediction of real-time ray tracing and when it becomes important. And I think that we'll be ready when the ecosystem's ready. Sorry, Marco, can't.
You know what? You know what you should do,
Directly.
Scott. You know what you should do? You should just tell everybody now what the next GPU is going to be and how how many new cores there'll be. Just get it off your chest. You'll feel better. You'll sleep better tonight. You'll be happier person. Tell everybody.
You might be out of a job,
What
but it's
I will
okay.
tell you, what I will tell you is, this is just the start of the new Radeon. This is the start, and we will make sure we're competitive through time, top to bottom.
Nice. Yeah, there were some questions about, what's the next Radeon looking like? What's the next Navi implementation looking like? And we know you can't go there, but there was actually a question that came in that I think was interesting to consider, and perhaps you can go to in terms of answering the question. Could you please ask Scott how Navi 40 CU compute units beats Vega 64 CU, and how they got such a big IPC increase out of their new architecture?
Yeah, I think we shared some of those slides on our presentation day. We had a 25% improvement in performance per clock, and that's really just because it's a brand new architecture from the grounds up. And so the architecture team at AMD just essentially went back and rewrote how we would build this GPU. And so we had a 25% improvement in performance per clock. And then we also had a 50% roughly or more improvement in performance per watt. And some of that is due to architecture. Some of that is due to 7 nanometer and some of those efficiency gains that as we went to 7 nanometer. But a large portion of these gains, if you look at the 64 CU down to now with RX 5700 XT at 40 CU, is really due to the fantastic work of the brand new feature that we're introducing with RDNA.
Nice. And why not continue the compute unit related naming? In other words, call it Navi 40, Navi 36 on a cut down versus, like Vega 64, for example.
I read.
It wasn't my question, dude.
I think the Reddit community now knows I read Reddit before I game at 11 p.m. I read Reddit like at 10:30. I go through there, and one thing that over the last year and a half, as I've been reading Reddit, our naming scheme has really confused gamers. If you look over the last 4 or 5 years, I think people have been very confused on how our stack lines up. Vega 64, Vega 56, even Radeon 7. We want to clean that up going forward. So if you look at the 5700 XT, we're going to make this a consistent model naming scheme for the next 5 to 10 years. And the 5 will be generational. The 7 is the performance in the stack. The 00 will either be 00 or 50, depending upon what we're doing with it. And then XT is usually going to be our top bin. No XT is like our middle bin. And so I think that if you take a look at what we want to do going forward, is make it very clear what you're buying, how it compares in the stack. It's going to take some time to clean that up as our older GPUs get refreshed with our newer GPUs. But my commitment to the gamers is I really want to clean that up. I want to make it easier to buy Radeon, more straightforward, and then generation to generation more consistent. So that way, our fans don't need to have a decoder ring just to figure out what GPU to buy.
Yeah. I think that's good advice for sure. And glad to hear you're heading in that direction. That makes sense. So we can expect, what you're saying is we can expect a logical progression in the next generation as it comes out. Some sort of naming convention that
year
makes
after
sense.
year after year. My goal is year after year, keep it consistent, make it, don't do funky things, keep it, simple and straightforward.
There you go. Marco, any other questions before we get to one of the big ones that I have coming up?
Yeah, so I'm going to wing this one because it's just looking at the numbers and having messed with everything. And I know you're not going to be able to get into real deep specifics here, but looking at the RX 5700 series and this first Navi GPU, the die size is relatively tiny relative to everything else that's out there. Especially a competitor stuff that's still nowhere, still at 12 nanometer and has all these extra cores in there. Theoretically, I mean, if you guys wanted to go nuts, and make a more compute units and a 384-bit memory bus with this architecture unchanged, you guys could go after the top end of the market. Yes, no, is it something maybe could happen? Just talk about those decisions, where you land and what's possible.
So we just launched the RX 5700 XT and the RX 5700. I'm super excited about those products, Marco. And I would love to, if you haven't received both of them, I'd love to send you one of those for your review.
Okay.
I think he's got a couple. Yep. No, that's good. That's good. Let's see. I'm trying to think if we have one more. What's that, Scott?
I said, sorry, Marco. It was a good try. It was a good try.
I know there was no way there was going to be specifics there, but it seems like AMD, it's so small. It's such a small GPU, relatively speaking, that there's so much possibility up or down. I'm just thinking out loud and seeing what you would say. That's all.
Cool. That's fine.
Awesome. Well, let's move on to something that I think really spurred this interview a little bit, and we had a little exchange on the Twitters, and felt that it was an interesting comment by you. You put out a tweet that sort of resonated across the geek sphere in a big way, and it really it spoke to your pricing strategy with respect to Radeon RX 5700 series products versus your competitors. Presumably their super product that came out just before your products lifted off embargo. And your tweet was Jebaited, which is a slang for baited in terms of, and we assumed it was directly related to pricing, but obviously it seemed like it was far-fetched that you guys would have been leading on in terms of pricing to see what how NVIDIA would tip their hand, but and that once you saw the super cards, you had the ability to reprice accordingly. You obviously had the margin. The architecture is efficient enough from a cost standpoint that you could limbo a little bit lower. But how did that all work, and what was it behind the scenes? Was it really a premeditated strategy, or how did that all work?
I've been looking forward to this last week for almost 2 years. And the go-to-market part of it, of course, we've been working on the GPU for longer than that. But we competitively model a lot of different situations. And when RTX launched, I think it was August, September of last year, we of course have some other GPUs, and we noticed that they have plenty of headroom that they left on the table when they launched those products. And so we started modeling different competitive scenarios. Their die size is quite big, and we knew what they could probably afford in terms of margins and pricing, and what they were currently pricing their products at. And so we started doing our competitive analysis and the timing of it. And knowing that it's a small industry, they probably knew roughly when we might come out with new products. And so we started taking a look at a couple different things. We definitely had a multi-level debate. And so I kept it cryptic on purpose, because I know, there's more things than just the pricing against super that we were waiting for. And, also their current stack that was in the marketplace, the 2070 and 2060, we knew what they had to do with that, or what we were forecasting different models and what they had to do with that to clear that stock, as well as launch the super. And with their bigger die size, what they could probably afford versus their corporate margin targets. And so it was a lot of fun modeling out the different scenarios. But I want to give you a little bit more meat behind maybe some of our competitive thoughts out in time. I can't talk to you about the private data that we use and the modeling that we use against it, but if I could, if you guys don't mind, Dave and Marco, I sent you some data and some information. Let me just talk to you about the public data that we used and how we gameplayed with that public data. And so the first thing that we take a look at is the publicly held data from like IDC, Mercury, or John Petty Research that really does a good job tracking, market data and market share. But the other piece of data that we look at is from Steam. So Steam has the largest game platform out there. Hundreds of millions of gamers use it around the world. And we look at GPU adoption, and we take a look at the trends of that GPU adoption. But I think it's important for the community to know how Steam really collects their data. And so I think I'll just have you pull up that first slide, I think, John, if you would. And let me just talk about this slide, because I kind of want to kill two birds with one stone, if you guys will just bear with me for a second. But the way Steam works is, hundreds of millions of gamers around the world use Steam. In China, Korea, United States, Canada, all throughout Europe. And the way Steam works is every once in a while, Steam will ask you, hey, look, do you want to share your data with us? And provide us some feedback. But their intention, Steam's intention, is never to use their data for market share. That is not what this data is for. This data is really to give game developers insight into the graphics and CPU horsepower or technologies, so that way the game developers who launch games through Steam know that, hey, if you want to sell 1 million copies of your game, here's the average horsepower you should look for. Or if you want to do a technology demo or a showcase in your game, here's the level of horsepower you can expect and the number of gamers that probably could play that game. So, in talking to them, their answer to people using their data for market share tracking, month by month, decimal point by decimal point, they kind of just look at us and say, hey, it's not at all what it's used for. And, a lot of people, analysts or press, and even some articles that come out, they often say, hey, why is your share so low on Steam? But when we look at IDC, Mercury, or John Petty, your share is a lot higher. And it's a very simple answer that I'd like to quickly clear up, and then I'll talk to you about how we looked at some other data into the Jebait comment. So if you look at this share chart to the left, Marco and Dave, you can see that our share goes down over time, and there's a really weird dip. And during that really weird dip, which is that 9 months there, something unique happened, which had us notice what the problem of gathering Steam data is. And that's when PUBG took off in China. So in China, there's millions of computers in iCafes. And in these iCafes, gamers go there with their friends and they play games. They rent a computer because maybe either they can't afford it or they don't have great broadband at home. And so every day, 6 to 10, 15, 20 gamers rent that PC and they game, and the iCafe wins because they, obviously make money off of renting off PCs. But what happens in the Steam data, even before that dip, is that Steam collected those users and double, triple, quadruple, 10 times, 20 times counted them. And so even before that dip, we still see a lot of those double and triple counting. So our share looks abnormally low. And then PUBG took off, and even more gamers in these iCafes started using Steam, which meant that our share went down. And the reason why our share went down is because over the last 10 or 15 years, AMD has never really focused on iCafes of selling GPUs or CPUs in iCafes. 80 to 90% of the share in iCafes is dominated by Intel and NVIDIA. We've never really focused on that market, and they've really focused on that market. And so we're underrepresented there. So as soon as those iCafes started even using Steam more, which is when PUBG took off, we took this really weird dip down because multiple users, as they log in through Steam asks them, hey, look, do you want us to survey your data? And if they click yes, and during the same day or during the same week, you could just see us drop down. And then, in that 13 and 14 number down there, that's when we started working with Steam to be like, hey, look, we think something's going on. Can you take a look at it? They did change their algorithm a little bit, but they're really not motivated to go and change this because the purpose of their data is not for market share. The purpose of their data is to show general trends to game developers. And so you can see that data went back up and it trends back up, but it definitely doesn't track our real share. So if you click down one, John, if you would for me, you can see the same thing actually happened in our CPU share. And so, it's still underrepresented. It's the same exact curve, and it's all related to iCafe. So click down one more. And you can see that if you just overlay the GPU share and the CPU share, it's quite evident that something weird's going on, and it doesn't match the IDC, Mercury, or John Petty research results. And so I just want to caution all the gamers out there and all the people who look at this type of data, you should not use this as a point-to-point share. It is definitely not intended to track it that way. And obviously, in China or in Korea or Taiwan, where there's a lot of internet cafes, multiple users logging on will really mess with the data. So what you should use it for is general trends. And this is what we use it for. So let's go ahead and click down one. We use this for general trend tracking. And so one of the things that we did in our analysis leading up to this launch is we said, how is Turing selling versus Pascal? How are their sales going versus the previous generation? The first thing you should note is, NVIDIA publicly says, hey, look, Turing's outselling Pascal quite a bit. Well, in that statement, it's a little misleading because, first of all, they raised SEPs on gamers, and second of all, when they launched Pascal, they only launched the 1080, and then they only launched the 1070, and everything else came significantly past that. When they launched RTX, they launched the 2080 Ti, the 2080, the 2070, the 2060, almost all at the same time. So of course, in terms of sales overall, their sales were higher, but it's not in terms of adoption. And so if you look at the 1080 versus the 2080, they're actually seeing, according to Steam, again, don't look at the 1.2 or the 1.0, because you should not look at that. You should just look at the rise over the run of the slope of the curve. And you can see that in general, their adoption from Turing to Pascal is a lot lower. That could be attributed to gamers not wanting ray tracing. They don't think it's ready. It could be attributed to the SEP price increase. It could be attributed to a lot of different things. But we started using this data to say, okay, if they're starting to see lower sales, they're going to be under a tremendous amount of pressure on price, and they're going to be under a tremendous amount of pressure to figure out what they're going to do to increase sales once we launch Navi. And so as you can see in each one of these charts, we use this publicly held data. And again, a gamer in Wichita, Kansas can go get the same exact data. There's nothing proprietary here. If you have the ability and the time, you can go collect this data on your own. But you can see that, you know, they're having less success with this new generation than the old generation. And so if you click down one, you know, just the last data point I would show for any analyst that's going to watch this in the future, you could see why we believe what we believe in terms of internet cafes being so dominant. And I'm sorry for the weird percentages here. It looks like as we translated this to an image, so you could just use it on the stream, the percentages got messed up a little bit. But you could see how influential those internet cafes were and when PUBG came out. It's just a tremendous spike in that curve, and then it dips back down. And that's why we can prove that the data up front is a little bit wacky. But we use this data to say, okay, leading up to the launch, we know they're going to launch something new. We know that they have a tremendous burden on their gross margins because their die size is big. And so we just gameplayed SEPs. And it's the second they launched the Super, which, by the way, this is the first time, I think, ever we've launched major products, more than one, and they've launched major products within the course of a week or so. And so we wanted to gameplay that a little bit. And you know, the prices that we originally put out, we waited to see what they put out, and then we made the appropriate move, not only to deposition their Super Series, but also to logjam their 2060 and 2070, because we knew that they were having slower success, and we wanted to do a double Jebait, which is not only block their Super strategy, but also slow down their 2060 and 2070. So that was the real Jebait. I can't go into too much more of that detail, but it has been so much fun these last couple of weeks, just playing that out. It's just fun to finally to win.
Gotcha. So you literally had a strategy up front, which said, let's test the waters with this pricing and then see what happens. And if we have to react, we can. That's
right.
In a nutshell.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, we had models built in either way, right? And it really depended upon, we didn't know exactly what they were going to do. And so we just wanted to make sure that we were ready and we could react quickly to that. And not only block Super internal momentum, but really block the older stuff that they have out in the channel that they needed to react with.
Interesting. Well, I mean, it's so far, I think the product is getting well received. We're starting to wrap up on our hard stop here at 4:45. But Marco, did you have anything else you wanted to throw in there with Scott before we let him off the hook?
I don't think so. I mean, you're not going to answer anything that I ask anyway. No, I think I'm good. The whole pricing question was there was a lot of buzz, obviously, among the community. People were like, "There's no way Lisa Su went on stage and gave out prices that were false." So it was good to have some clarity there and get some strategy there. I think I'm good. I really appreciate you coming on, Scott. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Marco and Dave. It's a pleasure. By the way, thanks for the first interview we've ever done together on a podcast. Thanks for your time, and I'm more than happy about the launch of our products. And I want to thank the gamers who have given us feedback and continue to give me feedback. I'm reading it. I'm excited for our new series, and I hope that you'll continue to game with our new products and get all the benefits that we put into this product for every game that launches.
anything to look for in the any teases or anything to look for in the weeks ahead that you can comment on, Scott, before we let you go?
Yeah, the last thing I'd like to mention is, a lot of people are asking us when our AIB partners will come on board, and that's going to be mid-August. So we're tracking right now the large majority of our AIBs to come on board on mid-August with their own designs. So if the blower is not your favorite, the blower design is not your favorite, you should wait for our AIBs. They'll have many different designs, some very unique, some familiar. But we're tracking that to mid-August, and we're excited to see what they come out with and the performance that the gaming community will get out of it.
So maybe some Navi cards with triaxial fans like Radeon 7 back there, right?
There will be a whole bunch of dual axial, triaxial, the water blocking. So I think you'll see quite the variety.
Nice. Can I squeeze in a quick one that it may be a non-issue, but it's just a question that came in on the live chat. So it looks like a viewer wants me to mention, I guess somebody did some analysis on the H.264 encoder, and I guess there were some issues with RX 5700. H.265 worked great, but H.264, there were issues. Is this something you guys are aware of? Is this something that's being looked at, or it's the news just sort of hitting now?
Marco, thank you for that question. I actually saw somebody post that in Reddit, and immediately, as soon as I saw that, I pinged our team. We are looking into that. It looks a little weird to me, so I'm not sure what's going on, but I think that was posted maybe 2 days ago. And immediately I took that to the software team, and we're taking a look at it right now to see if there's something that we're missing, or maybe what we could do is engage with that person who posted that and see, try to replicate that and find out what's going on. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah. Well, hey, Scott, thanks very much for joining us today. Scott Herkelman from AMD, the VP and GM of the Radeon Business Unit. Thanks for bearing with us. Folks, what we're going to do after we close down here is we're going to pull together the VOD, which will splice that one little drop we had in the stream and bring it all together so it's neat and clean, so you can check out the full interview. We'll have it up on the channel shortly. Scott, it's been a pleasure. I'm sorry for the little gremlin there in the middle, but you were fantastic. We appreciate you hanging tough with us.
No problem. Hey, nice to see you guys, and thanks to all the gamers out there buying our products. And Dave, Marco, good to see you. We'll see you soon, I'm sure. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. And stop by HotHardware.com, where you can find Marco's absolutely detailed deep dive review on Radeon RX 5700 and the 5700 XT. And with that, we will bid you adieu. Thanks for stopping by.